Welcome back, witches. If you've made it to this point in the course, then that means that you've already watched the introductory video, you've already read through the introductory PDF, the Herbal Correspondences PDF, and Module 1. In Module 1, we discussed working with plant spirits. Now, establishing a relationship with plant spirits is so intricate and so important. I don't know how many of you guys work with deities. I know that not all witches do, but if you work with any kind of deities, spirit guides, animal totems, ancestors, angels, anything of that nature, you know that you cannot go in and start asking and demanding things without an established relationship and without also offering something in return. Everything in witchcraft is about give and take. Everything in life is about give and take. And to approach any kind of spirit of any sorts without any kind of relationship and demanding that they help you manifest your desires or obtain your goals is not only rude, it's really disrespectful. And it is not a good way to start with any kind of spirit. So it's always better and it's always respectful to start a dialogue, start a line of communication, and work on building a relationship. And how you can do that, we discussed that in Module 1. We discussed, going and giving offerings and thanks in Module 1. And we also talk about another way that you can begin a relationship with spirits. Seedlings. Now, I want to go ahead and apologize in advance. I can see that there's a little bit of glare from my ring light on my glasses. I do apologize for that. However, I see much better with them, and my ring light holds my phone and makes it possible for me to film this. So I apologize, just bear with me. But anyways, so these seedlings right here, the reason that I have these seedlings in the middle of summer in Texas is because it's absolutely too hot for me to grow these outside right now. Being in Texas, there are some perks. We have an incredibly long growing season. Technically, we have two. So I have my plants in my garden that I started them as seedlings in February, planted them in March, and I've gotten a lot of tomatoes, squash, my kale's doing great, things like that. And I also gotten some pumpkins. Well, now that we're in the hottest part of the summer, and it's been a really, really hot summer. Last week we had 3 days in a row where it was 103 degrees with a heat index of over 110. And then one of those days it was 106, making the heat index closer to 115. It's ridiculously hot and my plants are not doing well. I've lost some squash, lost some tomatoes, and then some of them are kind of going in low production lull, which is pretty normal. They will start to produce more once it cools down a little bit, hopefully. Hopefully we don't continue to have those kind of heat waves or else they might not make it. So the reason that I started these seedlings is so I can take advantage of the second part of growing season here in Texas. Now, if I were to plant these guys outside with the heat temperatures that we've been having, they wouldn't make it past germination, if they even germinated at all, to be honest. So I started these inside. And another thing is if I've ever, anytime I work with a plant that I haven't previously grown, so I haven't gardened many of these. I've got snap peas here, I've got some wax beans here, I've got radish. I do have some beets, and I have grown beets before, but I find that as a general rule, beets grow better when they're started indoors. I've also got some different carrots, and carrots are super, super meticulous in how they grow, and I really wanted to make sure that they made it. So these are all plants that can deal with more of the cooler weathers. So the idea is I would plant them towards the end of August, and I would get vegetables from them all the way through till the end of October. Now that I have started these seedlings, I have started to build a relationship with them because I have cultivated, I have nurtured them. I have continued to give them water when they need it. I have continued to give them sun when they need it. I'm listening to them. We're learning from each other. So that's why seedlings are another great way to start establishing a relationship with plant spirits. Another area of discussion in Module 1 was foraging. Foraging is one of my all-time favorite things to do because although I can grow a myriad of herbs and vegetables and fruits in my yard and in my garden and in containers, there are some things that I'll never be able to grow. trees is a prime example of that. And then some other things that are indigenous to my area, and because they are indigenous to my area and they grow so freely, I don't really need to purchase seeds and grow them in containers when I can just readily go find them. I live in an area that's known as the Hill Country in Texas. And yes, Texas is hot, but we actually have some perks because we have hills, as Hill Country would imply, but we also have a lot of rivers. We have a lot of bodies of water that run through this area, and with water and rivers comes all kinds of plant life and ecosystems. So one of my favorite things to do when I go spend time at the river is to also bring a bag and some scissors and some water and some other offerings and forage. One of my, one project I've got going on right now is actually an oil that I'm making. It is pine oil, kind of hard to see from the ring light, sorry. It is pine oil, and I found these pines. I was actually on a work business trip, which was outside of Austin, and we stayed at a really cool Airbnb, and they had pines everywhere. It's actually called Lost Pines, that part of Texas, because pines aren't really, it's not that they're not indigenous, but they really aren't common in this part of Texas. So the fact that there's this whole area of all these pine trees is incredible. So of course I had to collect some needles and some stems, and I collected some pine cones for some Yule crafting as well. I then, whenever I foraged for these, of course, gave an offering and gave thanks. And I did not take more than I needed, and I did not deplete off of one plant too much so that it can't recover. I kind of spread it around a little bit. I didn't take off of anything that was young or like a sapling or anything like that that needs those branches. I took off of older trees that were more established. They weren't going to miss the broken branch too much, or they weren't going to miss those missing needles or pine cone. I then submerged it in oil, and I'm letting it just do its thing, and I'm going to allow this to go for quite some time because the longer they emulsify, the stronger they are. But that's for next week, so I don't want to get too heavy into that. But this is a prime example of foraging, things that I can't grow. I mean, I could plant a pine tree in my yard, but I'm not going to. I don't have the room, and I don't know how well it would fare since I don't have other trees to keep it shaded. And that being said, foraging is my best option for getting pine. Touching again on offerings and thanks, I mentioned in the PDF for Module 1 that one of my favorite things to give as offerings is water, and that's very true. But different practices and different magical systems believe in leaving different things as far as offerings. Liquor is acceptable, tobacco is acceptable, pennies are acceptable. It really just depends. Now, what you never want to do is leave anything that would be trash. Like, don't leave, a bunch of plastic containers or glass that can be broken, things like that. Think in regards of what would be beneficial to the plant and its environment. As witches, I really believe, I strongly believe that we have a responsibility to this earth and to provide healing to the earth, not only to other people, but to the earth itself. So we don't want to do more harm. We want to help the earth when we can. Offerings and thanks are so important. You can also sing a song to the plant. You can write a poem for the plant. You can just say a quick incantation. You can write something that you use repetitively with the plant. The possibilities are endless. Just make sure that you are giving an offering and make sure that you're giving thanks. Once you've harvested your plants, you're going to be ready to dry them out so that you can use them for magical and medicinal purposes. This is when that jute cord that I showed you in the introductory video is really going to come in handy. So to use as an example of how you would properly dry your harvest, I'm going to show you some nasturtium. Now, nasturtium is a flower that's all parts of this plant are edible, and they're also great for companion planting and will help deter pests like cucumber beetles and things like that. So I actually planted nasturtiums outside the perimeter where my cucumbers grow, and it's been pretty successful. I haven't had the infestation of cucumber beetles that I've had in years past, and I'll definitely use this more. You can actually use the flowers, there's the little orange ones. You can use them in salads, you can use the leaves in salads, you can make teas, poultices, all kinds of things from nasturtiums. So my nasturtiums, they got pretty big pretty fast. So it doesn't hurt them at all for me to go and take a few good chunks out. But like always, I give thanks and I never deplete more than I need or more than necessary from one plant. I take my cord. As you can see, this is pretty laxed and pretty loose. You can do it tighter if you want to, but just remember that you want to be able to allow the air to properly circulate through here, or else it's not going to dry and it's going to take longer. So you just really wrap the jute around the base, turn it upside down, put it in a bundle like this, tie it, secure it, make sure you leave enough cord so that you can hang this. And now you're free to hang it. Depending on the size of your bundle, it can take anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks for your herbs to properly dry out to be either stored or used. If you're going to store them, you want to make sure that they're completely dry. You don't want to over dry them because they tend to get really flaky, crumbly, and kind of lose some of their scent and their potency. But you definitely don't want to put an herb that isn't completely dry into a jar, because then you're going to have some mold issues and you're going to go to use it and it's going to be pretty gross. I've learned from experience. So now that we've dried our herbs and we've harvested them, the next thing we're going to talk about that we went over in Module 1 is speaking our intentions to them. Every time I go to do a ritual or a spell, as I'm mixing in my plants that I'm using, I say to them, I ask of them what I want from them. If they're a plant that has a property of protection and that's what I'm using, then I'm going to ask this plant to be activated with the property of protection, to use for XXX, to use for protect my husband at work from COVID-19, things like that. My husband works in a hospital, right? So that's one example. And another example besides protection would be if you were going to use something for prosperity, to bring money or financial success into your life, you're going to want to tell that plant. So agrimony, if you looked in our herbal correspondences page, can be used for prosperity, and it can be used for other things too. So it's very important that you tell the plants what exactly it is that you're requesting of them. And since you've established a relationship with them and given them offerings and thanks, they should gladly comply. And with that, we have successfully completed the video of Module 1. So now head on over to Module 2's PDF, followed up with Module 2 video, and I will see y'all there.